Good morning. I'm Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. I'm sitting in the Stone Chapel. I teach from here right now on the internet every Sunday. And last Sunday, I taught from the Gospel of Luke. The 24th chapter gives a story about Jesus meeting up with some of his disciples later on Easter Day. The disciples didn't understand it was Jesus initially. And it was on the road to a town called Emmaus, about a 7-mile walk from Jerusalem. And Jesus explained from the Old Testament or from the prophets, as he called it, to those disciples, how God had always told readers of the prophets that the Messiah would have to come and suffer and die and be resurrected. And it reminded me of the Stone Chapel where I am right now. I'd love to show you part of it. You know, the Bible is not a book in a sense. The Bible's a collection of a lot of different books written in a lot of different styles. There are songs, there are allegories, there are histories, there are legal documents and laws and all sorts of poetry and all sorts of different things. So anyway, one of the books of the Bible in the New Testament is a book called Hebrews. And what most scholars seem to think is that the book of Hebrews is actually an early church sermon that's been written out. And I like it so much that in our chapel, if I can show you this, let's see if I can make this work. It says, Palaiho theos lalesas tois patrisen in tois prophetais. It means long ago, God spoke to the fathers in the prophets. It's the understanding that prophets in the Old Testament is not just something to capture history. It was God's message for the ages. And I put that in the chapel up here, or had it put in the chapel to be more accurate, because underneath it, I've got 3 massive sets of panoramas of pictures, vignettes, early civilization PowerPoint, if you will, of stories from the prophets that all talk about the Messiah. And these stories are important because they not only gave Israel and students of the Bible an understanding of who the Messiah was going to be, but even more important than that, they give us a fuller understanding of the integrity not only of the Bible, but of God's redemptive plan. What God lets humanity live. Humanity makes real choices. You and I can choose to wear a seatbelt or not. We can choose to drive intoxicated or not. We make real choices that have real effects. But in the midst of all of that, God still orchestrates his plan. Nothing happens without it working into God's plans, without God's foreknowledge, and without God's planning for it. And so we have the assurance from history that just as certain as God was able to prophetically explain how the Messiah would suffer, would die, would be in the tomb for 3 days and resurrected to a new life, and would draw all the nations to himself, just as that gospel message was there 2,000 years ago and before. So we've got the assurance today that today is not out of God's control. When the history books of the age of humanity are finished, we'll be able to look back at those and see that every choice we made and everything that happened ultimately worked out in God's redemptive good. And that's an assurance that helps me today, because I know whatever I face, I've got a God who's in control. I'd love you to join me this Sunday. I'll be teaching live from in here at 11 o'clock Central Time. Brent's put the links below or above, wherever he puts them on this video. And so check those links out and see if you'd like to join us live this Sunday. I'll be talking more about the vignettes that we've got painted into the chapel ceiling and going into some depth about the story of Moses, one of Israel's greatest prophets, and how that speaks of Jesus. I hope to see you Sunday. If not, I'll see you next week for the videos of the day.